Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Magnuson one-on-one interview. I'm Estelle Sedman, and I'm here with Cooper Harrison. We're really excited to be joined today by Greg Poulin, the CEO and founder of Goodly. He's kindly agreed to join us for a conversation about his entrepreneurial journey, the startup world, and his company today. Gregory holds a BA from Wheaton College and a Master of Arts and Liberal Studies from Dartmouth College, where he studied globalization. He moved to Silicon Valley after graduation, where he began the student loan repayment benefit company, Goodly. Goodly's been featured in Business Insider, TechCrunch, Forbes, Times, and was accepted into the summer 2018 batch at the prestigious startup accelerator Y Combinator. Goodly has seen impressive growth since graduating from Y Combinator, and we're excited to hear about its past, present, and plans for the future. Greg, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, Greg, so we just want to start by asking you if you could just, for anyone that's not familiar with Goodly, give us a quick overview of kind of what the company's about, what your goals are.
Yeah, absolutely. The main idea behind Goodly is that our platform allows companies to offer student loan repayment as an employee benefit. So effectively, the way that our system works is that we allow employers to make monthly payments directly towards their employees' student loan debt, with the main goal of both helping employees become debt-free faster, while also helping employers to both recruit and retain top talent, and also, of course, support the financial wellness of their staff as well.
That is so awesome. And can you tell us a little bit more about what kinds of companies Goodly works with?
Sure thing. And we work with a pretty broad range of employers, and of course, being headquartered here in Silicon Valley, we do work with a lot of startups and other tech companies that are based both in the Valley and in the greater San Francisco area. But in terms of some of the other companies that we work with, we've been working with employers across the country, really spanning every industry imaginable, with about 70% of employees graduating from school with significant student loan debt. It is a benefit that speaks to a lot of employers. So in addition to both tech and startups, we also have both a lot of nonprofits and professional services, so industries like medicine and law, that typically do require an advanced degree that often carries significant amounts of student loan debt. But we also work with employers that you might not think of being, or industries you might not think of as having high levels of student loan debt. So for example, we have a number of manufacturing companies on our platform, along with everything from coffee shops and even some Ben & Jerry's locations, along with other retail and service industries that have recognized that a lot of their employees are struggling with student loans and been starting to offer things like Goodly and student loan repayment as a way to help support those folks that are struggling with their student loan debt as well.
Okay, that is fantastic. Thank you. And before we go a little bit more into Goodly, if we could back it up a little bit, because we're really excited to share your entrepreneurial insight with the larger Dartmouth community. So if you could maybe tell us a little bit about what drew you to Dartmouth and maybe about your time there as well.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that really drew me to Dartmouth more than anything else was the opportunity both to challenge myself in a really rigorous academic environment, and also having the opportunity to spend 2 years in Hanover was pretty hard to pass up. And while I was at Dartmouth, had a lot of opportunities to work at both the intersection of government and technology. So one of the experiences that I had at Dartmouth was the opportunity to work at the White House on tech policy. And one of the projects that I worked on in 2015 while in the Obama administration was working on the first ever White House Demo Day, which was focused on inclusive diversity. So we brought in 30 different startup teams from across the country to demo their products for President Obama. And it gave me a lot of experience working directly with startup founders and other tech companies from across the United States, and also seeing how you can use technology to solve large-scale societal problems. So when I graduated from Dartmouth, made the decision to move to Silicon Valley and start working for another early stage startup so I could get more experience in terms of what actually goes into building and scaling really successful companies as well.
That's so cool. Okay, well, that leads right into our next question, which is, when you were a college student, what was your perspective on entrepreneurship? And then did you envision yourself entering that world?
Absolutely. I always knew that I did want to do something in the startup or tech world. Wasn't entirely sure exactly what that would look like. So during my time in college, really had a great opportunity to really pursue two main passions, both government and also technology, and within that, startups. And so having the opportunity to both work in government and also see how you can use different tools to help solve some large scale societal problems, specifically with student loan debt, gave me a good foundation to be able to then launch into doing something in tech, because I knew that I always wanted to do something with startups, but wasn't entirely sure what that was. So being able to have that balance between both working in government and also wanting to start something on my own was a really nice balance in terms of being able to help iron out exactly how I could move and transition from Dartmouth into working in tech here in Silicon Valley as well.
Definitely. Okay, well, that is so cool. Okay, well, then one final Dartmouth question for now, which would be, did you meet anyone at Dartmouth who inspired you, or did you work in any areas that were really important to your career after college? So you mentioned government work, but did you have any mentors that you could speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think two of the mentors or folks that I worked probably the closest with at Dartmouth were Professor Donald Peace, who was one of my thesis advisors, and then also Professor Susanna Heschel in the Jewish Studies Department, and worked really closely with Professor Heschel, both as a research and graduate teaching assistant for the 2 years that I was at Dartmouth, and had the opportunity to work really closely with Professor Heschel and learn from her experience. And she actually ended up writing my letter of recommendation for my role at the White House. And then also working with Professor Peace, in addition to being my thesis advisor and helping to guide me through that process, I also worked as a teaching assistant for many of his classes as well. And so being able to work both very closely with Professor Peace and Professor Heschel has been a great experience. And they're two folks that I do still keep in contact from my time at Dartmouth. And I think those were probably two of the most important people in terms of folks that inspired me from my time at Dartmouth as well.
So shifting now to when you started Goodly, you could just talk about, a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with coming up with what to do after they have their big idea. Can you talk about your experience launching the company, maybe talk about the Y Combinator and acquiring funding?
Yeah, sure thing. And one of the, I think, hardest parts about actually starting a company and starting a startup is making that decision to jump from, if you are in a job or if you're about to graduate from a place like Dartmouth and looking at different career opportunities, one of the hardest decisions can be making that decision to actually start a company and forgo other avenues of employment. And the way that we approached it when we first started the company was we knew that we wanted to build a solution to help solve the student loan crisis. So we started connecting with as many different people in the industry that we could. So when we first started Goodly, we set out just to meet with as many thought leaders in both the HR and employee benefits, as well as startup and venture capital space as we could. So as we were building our first MVP or minimal viable product, we spent the first 2 weeks just meeting with about 40 different thought leaders in the HR and employee benefits space. So including folks who are either startup founders or other tech CEOs, as well as members of the HR and employee benefits community, or folks that filled those types of positions within their employer and who would ultimately become our target market and the people that we would want to sell to, and really allow those conversations to help guide our product development. And some of the things that came from that is that for a lot of folks that do work in employee benefits, they're looking for a really easy system, both to be able to implement, as well as to be able to use and administer on an ongoing basis. So being able to talk to those users really helped to guide both of our early product development and building a tool that would really fit the needs of our end users, who are the employers that we sell to. And it's something that continues to guide our product development today. So we're constantly reaching out to our users and the employers that are on our platform and asking for their feedback in terms of how we can iterate on Goodly and build the best possible product for them. So one piece of advice that I always provide to other early stage entrepreneurs or aspiring founders is to spend as much time as possible speaking to the people that will ultimately become your clients and your users, and figuring out what information you can learn from them and incorporate that with your product as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then can you just speak a little bit about your experience at the Y Combinator? I think a lot of young entrepreneurs see that as something they'd like to do.
Absolutely. And our experience with Y Combinator was really phenomenal. We actually ended up both having our YC interview, and then one of our group partners during our batch at YC in the summer of 2018 was Jeff Ralston, who's also a Dartmouth grad, and he's now the president of YC. And so we got to work hand in hand with Jeff during our time at Y Combinator. And it was a great experience, both in learning from his experience building and scaling companies and early stage companies. But Y Combinator is great because it helps to create a really strong network of founders from all sorts of different backgrounds, working in companies across different sectors. But our experience with YC was great for a few reasons. One is, again, the network that you can build and learn from other founders and entrepreneurs and when you're starting your company, which is really invaluable, particularly in the early days of starting a company. And the other piece that we found really helpful was from a fundraising perspective. YC is really great because it culminates at the end of the session with Demo Day, where they bring in about 1,000 different investors from across the world to view your pitch and have the opportunity to network with those folks. So in terms of both fundraising and networking, YC was really valuable from that front. And so for any early stage entrepreneurs, I always advise them that YC can be a really great launching pad for starting their company and being able to scale the company from there as well.
Awesome. Well, Greg, you don't have a strictly technical background, and you're the CEO of a tech company. Can you talk a little bit about, how you've created a team around you to tackle that?
Absolutely. And I was really fortunate because before starting Goodly, I was one of the early employees at another YC startup called Rippling, which is also in the HR and employee benefits space. Rippling is a new take on building HR and payroll platforms for employers. And when I started as one of the early stage employees there, right when Rippling was joining the winter batch at Y Combinator in 2017, I started about a week apart from who would ultimately become my co-founder, who was an early stage early engineer at Rippling, and having the opportunity to find that right balance between being a non-technical founder with more of a business background, having a technical founder that can kind of fill the gaps and really be a complementary founder was something that was really valuable. And particularly for a lot of students at Dartmouth, there's a great opportunity that if you don't have a technical background, to find somebody from the Dartmouth community that has studied computer science or has experience in writing code and can help to really balance out and complement your skill set as a founder. Because one of the things that's really valuable, both for Y Combinator as well as other investors, and also just building and scaling a company, is to have somebody who can really manage both the business from more of a sales and marketing perspective, and then also another co-founder that can manage everything from more of a technical and product side. And so we'd always encourage folks that are interested in starting an early stage company, if they don't have a technical background, to be able to find somebody that does have that complementary skill set and can kind of fill the gaps in terms of areas where they don't have a background or level of expertise as well.
Awesome. And then can you just talk a little bit about like competitors for Goodly on the market? What differentiates Goodly, and what are you guys focusing on trying to bring yourself to the top?
Yeah, so there are a few things. There really aren't any direct competitors that are doing exactly what Goodly is doing. So there are a few other folks that sell or market their platforms as employee benefits in terms of helping employees to manage their student loan debt or refinance their student loans and pay off their student debt faster. But with Goodly, our platform's quite a bit different for a few reasons. One is that we've invested a lot of time in building integrations with our platform with other HR and employee benefit systems. So it can help to streamline a lot of the back office work or other administration that would go into offering this benefit if you didn't have those integrations. And then when it comes to offering student loan benefits, we do have the most turnkey platform because we've invested a lot of time in our user experience and our user design. So it takes the average employer just about 10 minutes to set up their account on our system. And then Goodly can streamline all the administrative work downstream of that. So we'll onboard all of their employees, verify their staff student loans, and then on a monthly basis, we facilitate that payment directly from the employer to the student loan servicer. So as an employer, after that 10-minute implementation, there's actually nothing for the company to have to manage internally. It's a true set it and forget it system because our software will just be processing in the background and managing all the other administration that would go into these programs through our integrations with the client's HR and payroll systems as well.
Yeah, it certainly seems that what you guys are doing is working. Can you just give everyone listening an idea of, kind of the success rates of Goodly? What have you guys seen in terms of giving these employees incentives to stay at the company through this student loan?
Yeah, so we've seen a few things. One, for employers, the companies that do offer student loan benefits typically see well above averages when it comes to things like employee engagement and employee retention, which is hugely valuable from a return on investment perspective for the employers that do offer our platform. Because the unique thing about our system is that by taking those employer contributions, we use our software to apply it as a secondary payment to the employee's student loan debt. So by taking this approach, we can actually help the average employee on our system become debt-free about 30% faster than they otherwise would, which means for the average student loan borrower, they're going to pay off their student loans between 6 to 8 years faster with the help of those employer payments. So it creates a ton of goodwill for the employer in terms of building a strong company culture that can support the financial wellness of their employees. And in turn, their staff tend to stick around longer. And the return for the employer is that it typically costs about 90 to 200% of an employee's annual salary to replace them when they leave, in terms of recruiting costs, ramping up new employees, and also just the value and skill set that you lose when an employee leaves to take another position. So if you can extend that employee's retention even very modestly, the employer can see a pretty significant return on that investment. And so that's one of the areas that we really focus on when we're selling to employers, is highlighting both the demand for these types of benefits from employees, but also how these benefits can help improve employee retention as well as recruiting efforts as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm going to turn it over to Estelle. She has a few questions regarding the current situation right now.
Thanks, Cooper. So for entrepreneurship today, as you anticipate the future of Goodly, are there any big themes or opportunities or risks that you see over the next couple of years, whether they're economic, environmental, social, or something else, as you anticipate where you'd like Goodly to go?
Yeah, absolutely. And we really, and our original thesis when we started the company was that within 5 years, student loan repayment would become as popular as 401ks, both with employers and employees. And at the time when we started the company, there were roughly about 2% of US employers that were offering this type of benefit to their staff. And in just the last year, that's increased to about 8% of all US employers. And in terms of anything that we would see in terms of opportunities or risks, of course, with the current COVID outbreak that we've been experiencing, that could pose a risk. But we've been actually very fortunate because we've been working with members of Congress to make student loan benefits tax-free. Because prior to the CARES Act, any contribution from the employer would be considered taxable income for the employee. But we were able to work with members of Congress to have a provision added to the CARES Act that allows employers to make tax-free contributions of up to $5,250 per employee annually toward the employee student loan debt without raising the employee's gross taxable income. So because employers can make these payments on a tax-free basis, it goes just that much further in terms of helping their staff become debt-free and pay off their student loans faster. So while certain industries, of course, have been hit harder than others by the COVID outbreak, it makes it difficult to sell to industries like healthcare and hospital systems. But some other industries are doing quite well and even thriving in the current environment. And they've been starting to offer student loan benefits, both as a way to support their employees that might be struggling from a financial perspective at this time, or experiencing income shocks from reduced hours, or for furloughed employees. And so we've seen employers doing everything from making one-time contributions for the COVID outbreak as really relief package for their staff, or employers that are offering these programs on a regular basis and making those recurring monthly contributions to help pay off their staff student loans. So it's been a mixed bag in terms of what we've seen from employers in response to the COVID outbreak. There are some that are struggling, but others that have been implementing these programs as a way to help support their staff during this difficult time as well.
That's so cool. Thank you for that insight. It sounds like you guys are pretty on top of what you need to be doing during this crisis, which is fantastic. So branching off of that, I would just ask, how do you envision the impact of the COVID crisis on other earlier stage entrepreneurs, and what advice might you give them, knowing as you do what Goodly's done to adapt?
Yeah, the COVID outbreak can, of course, make it challenging for employers of all sizes, but it can be particularly challenging for early stage tech companies and startups. But at the same time, it also creates a great opportunity both for disruptions and also for new solutions to emerge and to help solve both the COVID crisis, but also different larger scale problems beyond that. And one of the interesting trends that we saw from the '08 financial crisis was there were a lot of early stage companies that got started in the wake of the financial crisis that are now some of the most successful startups and tech companies. So if you look at Airbnb or Dropbox, for example, are two of the companies that did emerge from the '08 financial crisis and have been able to be, of course, very successful companies today. And so one of the things that we've been seeing with the COVID outbreak is that there have been huge shifts in the way that people both work, socialize, and even attend school, as many Dartmouth students know from taking classes over Zoom. And so one of the interesting things that will be interesting to see over the next few years are whether the companies and long-term trends that will emerge from the COVID outbreak and can be successful within that. So even though it might on the surface look as a very challenging situation, it also creates a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs to help to solve that problem and also build large-scale and successful companies as well. So for anyone who's interested in starting a company, they should be really looking for ways both where they can help to solve large-scale problems for folks that might be struggling during the COVID outbreak, and how they can turn that into a long-term success with a company, while also helping to solve some of the short-term challenges that we're experiencing right now as well.
Can you talk a little bit more about working with the Congress and everything to pass this amendment to the CARES Act? That's super interesting. I think it's going to have a huge impact for a lot of struggling people right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that we found when we started the company just under 2 years ago, when we officially launched about a year and a half ago, One thing that we found is that when student loan benefits are a taxable benefit to the employee, it can be a blocker for a lot of employers to be able to implement these types of systems. And so as we were working through our sales process and talking to a lot of employers, everything from early stage companies to Fortune 500 companies, one theme in terms of the reasons why they would not implement student loan benefits was it was a taxable benefit. And that if we were able to have it become a tax-free benefit, similar to the way an employer can contribute to their staff's 401ks, then that would open the door to allowing a lot new user growth and a lot of new companies offering these types of programs. So there was actually a piece of legislation called the Employer Participation in Repayment Act that allows employers, or would allow employers, to contribute up to $5,250 per year towards their staff's student loan debt on a tax-free basis. And it was introduced in February of 2019. And so over the last year, we've been working with members of Congress that introduced this legislation to help advocate for the bill and to create awareness around some of the employers that we're working on and the impact that these benefits do have for their staff. And so when the bill was first introduced to the Senate, it had about 19 co-sponsors with a handful of co-sponsors in the House. And in just the last year, we were able to increase that to about 64 members of the Senate that signed on as co-sponsors, as well as about 270 members of the House of Representatives. So it has widespread bipartisan support. Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell, who lead the Democratic and Republican parties in the Senate, both signed on to co-sponsor this legislation in the same day. So it is really unique to see in today's current political climate such levels of bipartisan support. So the bill did have enough support to pass in both the Senate and the House, and President Trump said he would sign it into law when it passes Congress. Prior to the CARES Act or the COVID outbreak, this particular piece of legislation was stuck in committee before it was being brought to the floor for a vote. So what we were able to do is have members of Congress incorporate this with the CARES Act as a way to help employers both relieve some of the financial stress on their employees while helping student loan servicers recover some of those funds by doing it on a tax-free basis as well. So since then, we've seen a huge surge in demand in terms of the types of employers that are looking to offer these types of programs to support their staff with student loan debt as well.
Yeah, that seems like it's going to be a huge opportunity for Goodly, and we're excited to see where that goes. So just to sum it up here, we'd like you, if you were to do it all again, or you're starting over, can you offer any advice for entrepreneurs? Do you have anything you would have done different? What have you learned through the process?
Yeah, and one of the things that I've learned in starting a company is that there really is no perfect time to start a company, and there are always going to be a million reasons not to start a company or to work on something else. And so the biggest challenge, I think, for a lot of folks in starting an early stage company is just making that decision to make that jump and actually start working on their company. So for a lot of folks, I would just encourage them, if they have an idea that they feel strongly about, that they're passionate about building, that they should make that decision to do so. And also to use your time at Dartmouth as a great opportunity, both to network with potential co-founders or other folks who are interested in working in tech or at early stage companies, and even founding a company as well, because leveraging the Dartmouth network can be one of the strongest avenues for a lot of folks, particularly for entrepreneurs, because here in San Francisco and in Silicon Valley, there are so many Dartmouth alums that are working in all aspects of tech, from everything from starting their own companies, working at large established tech companies, and then also working in the venture capital community as well. And so using the Dartmouth network and find time to network with folks that do work in Silicon Valley is something that can pay a lot of dividends further down the road when you do make that decision to start a company. And Dartmouth is really unique in that it does have such a strong alumni network and strong culture that allows folks to really tap into that. So there are, of course, great services like the Magnuson Center and also the Dartmouth Entrepreneurship Forum, both in San Francisco and in Hanover, that can be phenomenal opportunities for folks, both current Dartmouth students and also alumni, to meet and network with other folks in the Dartmouth tech universe as well.